Chapter 5. Elsa did not appear that night, although Keen tossed and twisted wakefully for miserable hours. In the darkness, the thing he had to do appeared grotesque, fantastic, impossible. And this despite the fact that he had already tested the truth of old Solomon Nestor's reasoning. His toe ached, and his lips and eyes burned, but more painful than all else was the idea of inflicting harm on the courageous and proud Red Peri. When, well toward the end of the 10-hour Plutonian night, he finally fell into troubled slumber, it was but for a brief while, and he rose sullen and morose to pace the floor of the chamber. The fluorolux light awakened old Nestor. For a few moments he watched the pacing Keen, and then asked, "Did Elsa come?" "No, and I hope she doesn't," snarled Keen. "I hope she couldn't get the key, and if she does get it, I'm not going through with this."
"It's your business," said Nestor indifferently. "It doesn't mean anything to me, because I'd never live through it, not at my age. I have to stay here anyway, and I shan't mind, because Elsa said they'd move my instruments into the cave, and I can work here almost as well as farther out in space. But if you love the girl so intently, why don't you act like a human being and tell her so?"
"Love her!" yelled Keen. "Just because I feel like a dirty dog at the thought of this doesn't mean I love her. She's a girl, isn't she?"
"And a very beautiful one."
"Bah! She's a girl, and I hate to fight women."
"Well, don't then," suggested old Solomon.
"Yet I want like the very devil to get back at her."
"Then do."
"And yet, in a way, I can't blame her."
"Then don't."
Keen resumed his pacing. In another minute he stopped, faced the old man, and said defiantly, "Solomon, I can't do it. I know she's a pirate and a menace to trade and civilization, but I can't do it." Before the other could reply, a knock sounded on the door. Keen whirled. "I hope," he muttered, "that it's breakfast, just breakfast." It was. Elsa brought it in silently, placed it on the table, and retired, and Keen felt a vast surge of relief. She hadn't managed to get the key. He was almost ready to sing until he picked up his cup of coffee, and there it was, the familiar key to the outer door of the Limbo's airlock. He met old Nestor's amused blue eyes with a cold glare, and it was hardly softened by the other's murmur,
"After all, Frank, you don't have to use it."
"I know I don't," he snarled. "I have a fine choice, haven't I? I can stay here the rest of my life, if our hostess doesn't take a notion to kill me, or I can escape by following your scattered-brained plan of doing a thing I hate. I can't escape alone, for they'd simply run me down with their pirate ship."
"Or you could turn pirate," suggested Solomon Nestor.
"Grrr," said Keen amiably. He was unaccustomed to this sort of agonized indecision. He had never encountered a situation that pulled so many ways at once. For in all his experience, right had been right, and wrong had been wrong, yet now he was not at all sure but that the laws of relativity operated in the moral field as well as in the physical. Certainly the Red Peri was not entirely in the wrong, yet equally certainly she was a pirate, a menace to progress, an antisocial being, and therefore a criminal. If she would only give up this mad purpose of hers, if she would make restitution, if she... He swore bitterly and strode out of the door, scarcely realizing that the Limbo's key was in his pocket. He turned at random toward the outer arch of the cave. Figures in spacesuits were passing in and out through the electrostatic seal, and he noticed that the outgoing men were laden with cases, boxes, cans, and bundles. He stood at the very edge of the seal and stared out into the dim, night-like morning of the black planet. Beside him, a row of metal-clad figures clanked outward, their footsteps dropping to sudden silence the instant they trod into the airless outdoors. He watched them carry their burdens to the Red Peri, where an airlock swung open to admit them. They were loading the ship. Keen stared disinterestedly, without comprehension. Then, abruptly, the meaning dawned on him. He stiffened, peered closely through narrowed eyes, and spun to accost a metal-sheathed figure that approached, Marco Grandi, for he could see the dark aquiline features behind the visor. "What's this?" Keen snapped. "You're cargoing the Peri? For what?" Grandi made no answer, and Keen planted himself squarely in the other's way. "For what?" he blazed. The metallic voice of the diaphragm clicked. "Stand aside! We're busy!" "I'll keep you busy!" he roared. I'll... "You'll what?" queried the cool tones of the Peri. Keen whirled. The girl stood at his side, clad in an all-enveloping, clinging robe of bright green that echoed the infinitely more brilliant emerald of her eyes. "They're stalking the Red Peri!" he shouted. "I know it." "Why? For what purpose?" "For purposes of business." "Business? You mean for purposes of piracy." "Piracy," she said coldly, "is my business." "It was your business, you mean?" With a great effort, he controlled himself and faced the mocking green eyes. "Peri," he said more calmly, "I want to talk to you." "It isn't mutual." "I want to talk to you," he repeated stubbornly, "alone." He glanced at the hostile eyes of Marco Grandi. The Peri shrugged. "Go on out, Marco," she ordered, and then to Keen, "Well, what is it?" "Listen," he said, "I want you to quit this business. I want you to be fair to yourself. You're capable of infinitely greater things than piracy." "I know it. When I'm ready, I'll achieve those greater things." "Oh, revenge!" he snapped. "Suppose you succeed. Do you think you'll be any happier?" "And if I'm not," she countered, "what is it to you?" He drew a deep breath. "It's a lot to me," he said soberly, "because you see, Peri, I happen to love you." Her green eyes did not change. "What you call love," she said contemptuously, "isn't my conception. If you loved me, you'd take me exactly as I am." "I was brought up to believe in honesty, Peri." "And I," she retorted, "was brought up to believe in honor. Red Peri McLean's honor needs avenging, and there's none but his daughter to see to it." Keen pounded his fist impatiently against the wall. "Peri," he said at last, "do you love me?" She made no immediate reply. From somewhere in her heavy silken gown she produced a cigarette, lighted it, and blew a gray plume of smoke toward the seal. "No," she said. "Why did you risk your life for me back there at the pit? What if you had touched the carbon feeders?" She glanced out into the cold black valley. "I may have thought I loved you then," she murmured, eyes still averted. "That was before I knew how little you could understand my feelings. We're just not the same sort." "I think we are," said Keen. "We've simply learned different moral codes. But, Peri, my code's the right one. Even you can see that." "It's not from me. What my father wanted is the thing I want, and the thing I'm going to do." He groaned and abandoned that line of attack. "What do you expect to do with Solomon Nestor and me?" She made a helpless little gesture. "What can I do? I have to leave you here." She turned her green eyes back to him. "Frank, if you'd promise to keep this place and my identity a secret, I think I'd be willing to release you." "I can't promise that." Her voice hardened. "Then here you stay." "So you've given up the idea of killing us?" "Oh," she said indifferently, "I'm always indulgent to those who claim to be in love with me." Her attitude angered him. You're pretty confident, aren't you? If you leave us here while you're off pirating, you know damn well we'll be doing our best to overcome you."
"And I know damn well that you'll never outwit me," she retorted.
Keen's hand suddenly encountered the Limbo's key in his pocket. "I won't, eh?" he muttered. "See here, Peri, are you determined once and for all to stick to this scheme of yours?"
"Once and for all, I am."
"And it makes no difference that I tell you I love you?" She turned abruptly and faced the grim outdoors, staring over the dead, cold black Plutonian landscape.
"It makes no difference, Frank."
"And nothing I can say will make a difference." She gestured impatiently, still staring far away.
"Oh, what's the use of arguing? No, Frank."
He looked silently at her, seeing her glorious hair flaming against the cold background of black mountains. He peered thoughtfully down the deserted corridor, and then at the red Peri. The valley was lifeless, the men were within the vessel, and the airlock was closed. Dim across the plain was the dull bulk of the Limbo, whose key was clutched in his hand. "Well," he muttered sadly, "you've asked for it, Peri." She did not turn.
"For what, Frank?"
"For this!" he cried, and with a sudden lunge he sent her and himself staggering, unarmored, into the airless Plutonian plain and into a temperature of 10 degrees above absolute zero.